If you abandoned No Man's Sky a while back, thinking the game was beyond saving, maybe it's time to give it a second chance. Because honestly, what Hello Games just did with the Swarm update is on another level. This isn't just random new content thrown in. It's a change that directly affects how you explore, fight, and survive in the universe. And look, there are things here I really didn't expect to see in the game, even after so many updates. So today, I'm going to show you 10 new features that make this update feel almost like a rebirth for No Man's Sky. I'm Matthew, and the video is about to begin. Man, this Hive of Glass is, for me, easily one of the most ambitious ideas No Man's Sky has ever had. It's not just another event or a different mission. It's the kind of thing that completely changes the sense of scale in the game. When you look up at the sky and see that absurd structure, Death Star style, it gives you a real feeling of, okay, this is serious. It's no longer peaceful exploration. It's a threat that seems alive, watching everything. The most interesting part is that it's not just a pretty backdrop. It reacts, attacks, and defends itself aggressively. These swarms of smaller ships it releases make the battle chaotic in a very cool way because you can't just focus on a single target. And that giant beam coming out of the iris is exactly the kind of thing that turns combat into a spectacle. It's not just difficult, it's cinematic. Another thing I think is very strong here is the focus on cooperation. This type of boss simply wasn't designed to be faced alone comfortably. It forces the community to team up, coordinate attacks, survive the chaos, and that completely shifts the pace of the game, which is normally more solitary. Here it becomes practically a collective event, almost like a space-scale raid. The Hive of Glass represents exactly what No Man's Sky does best today, taking that gigantic universe and turning it into memorable experiences. It's not just more content, it's the type of update you jump into to check out and end up staying because you want to be part of something bigger. It's the kind of battle you remember afterward, not just for the challenge, but for the feeling of being in the middle of something truly epic. One of the most interesting things about this update for me is how they managed to provide a sense of identity right at the start of the expedition. This personality test isn't just a trivial detail, it truly creates an immediate connection with your faction. When the game labels you as Royal, Sage, or Weaver, it feels like you're not just starting another journey, you're representing something within that universe. And the coolest part is how each faction carries this concept of a fragment of the traveler's soul. This gives a somewhat symbolic weight to the choice, even if it's automated. It's not just red team or blue team, you know? It feels like there's a bigger idea behind it, as if every player were helping to complete something broader within the game's narrative. Now, the point I found strongest is the balance between competition and cooperation. There is that healthy rivalry. You want your faction to stand out, but at the same time, everyone needs to work together to face the main threat. This completely changes the community dynamic during the expedition because it doesn't just become a dispute, it becomes collaboration with a touch of team pride. And of course, you can't ignore the visual impact of it all. Earning a faction-themed ship and uniform helps a lot in reinforcing this sense of belonging. You start to see yourself as part of something greater, and that, for a game like No Man's Sky, which has always been very solitary at times, is an addition that makes the experience much more alive and connected. One of the additions that caught my attention the most was this competitive war effort, because it completely changes the sense of impact your actions have. It's no longer just doing missions for individual rewards. Now you feel that every single thing you do is pushing your faction forward in a global dispute. The most interesting aspect is how they divided this into 3 categories: purge, restoration, and sabotage. This creates different styles of contribution, so it doesn't really matter how you like to play. There is always a way to help your team. I like this because it avoids that feeling of repetitive grind and gives you more freedom to participate in the event in your own way. And at the same time that there is this competition between the factions, everything still revolves around a collective goal, which is building the prismatic core at the anomaly. So there's that very nice balance. You want to see your team win, but you know everyone needs to collaborate for the overall progress to happen. It's a rivalry that doesn't divide the community. It gives everyone more reason to engage. Now, the most striking detail for me is this idea of immortalizing the winning faction inside the space anomaly. This gives absurd weight to the choices and efforts during the expedition. It's not just something temporary. It's a permanent mark in the game's universe. Knowing that what you did can become a visible memorial for other players in the future creates a very different motivation, almost as if you are leaving your own footprint in the history of No Man's Sky. To me, this overhauled space combat is easily one of the most important changes No Man's Sky has needed for a long time. It was always cool to fly, explore, and even fight, but there was that feeling that the combat didn't keep up with the rest of the game. Now, it feels like it finally clicked. Everything is clearer, more precise, and much more fun to play. The improvement in third-person visibility makes a massive difference. Before, losing sight of the enemy in the middle of a fight was common, and that completely broke the rhythm. Now, you can actually track who you've locked onto, maintain pressure, and make faster decisions. It seems like a technical detail, but in practice, it completely changes the dynamics of the battles. The new reticle and autofollow also greatly raise the level of the experience. The more responsive aim removes that feeling of fighting against your own controller, and the smarter autofollow helps especially in chases, which are now much more fluid. It's not something that plays for you, but it provides that support that makes combat more strategic and less frustrating. Overall, I see this as one of those updates that doesn't grab as much attention as a giant boss in the sky, but has a much greater impact on the day-to-day, because you will use this all the time. And honestly, after these improvements, space combat finally feels like it's on the same level of quality as the rest of the game's universe. Before, much of the combat was basically holding down the fire button and tracking the target. Now you actually need to aim, choose where to hit, and pay attention to the enemy's behavior. The detail of visible weak points, usually glowing or well highlighted, makes everything more intuitive, but at the same time more tense. Because in the middle of a swarm of swarmer ships coming at you, hitting that exact right spot becomes a real challenge. And when you land the shot and see the critical damage pop up, it's a much more satisfying feeling than just shooting indiscriminately. What I find most interesting is how this adds a layer of skill without making the game inaccessible. Those who just want to survive can still deal normal damage, but those who put in the effort to aim better are clearly rewarded. This creates a performance gap more based on player skill than just ship equipment. Overall, this system makes combat more strategic and less automatic, especially against hordes where you need to decide quickly which target to prioritize and where to aim. It makes everything more dynamic. For me, it's exactly the type of mechanic that adds depth without overcomplicating things, and it makes every battle feel more engaging. This new feature of swarmer ships is one of the coolest parts of this update, because it mixes combat with exploration in a very natural way. First, you face these mini swarms of super agile ships, which already change the rhythm of the battles, making everything more chaotic and dynamic. It's not that same slow space combat as always. Here, you need to react fast and adapt all the time. But what really won me over is what happens after the fight. Being able to go to the wreckage of these ships and turn that into something useful for your own journey is very satisfying. It doesn't end with the victory in combat. You literally reuse what was left of the battle to evolve, whether it's with resources, technology, or even new possibilities within your fleet. And I quite like how they spread this across dissonant planets, with areas protected by drones and even buried wreckage that you need to excavate. This creates small, more tense moments of exploration, almost as if every crashed ship were a mini event. You never know exactly what you're going to find, and that makes the loop much more interesting. The detail that hooks me the most is this part about investigating the wreckage to get lore. This adds an extra layer to everything, because it's not just resource farming. You start piecing together a story behind these ships and this swarm. In the end, it becomes the type of content that rewards you as much for your curiosity as for your effort, and that is exactly the kind of thing No Man's Sky does best nowadays. These planetary battles with the swarm drones are a very interesting change because they totally break that calmer rhythm that No Man's Sky usually has on the ground. Normally, exploring a planet is something calmer, almost contemplative. Here, no, you step into certain areas and suddenly you are being surrounded by fast, aggressive, and hard to track enemies. What I liked most was the behavior of these drones. They are small, agile, and don't stay still, so forget about that static combat. You need to move all the time, adjust your aim quickly, and react to the chaos. This makes the fights much more intense and even somewhat claustrophobic, especially in areas with wreckage where space is naturally more limited. These scenarios with destroyed ships also help with immersion. It's not just random enemies spawning, it feels like you've entered a contaminated zone, almost as if the planet were being consumed by this threat. This gives more weight to the combat because it's not just fighting, it's surviving in a hostile environment that clearly has already gone wrong for someone before you. Overall, I see these battles as a great way to diversify gameplay outside the ship. They bring a type of pressure the game doesn't usually have on the ground and force you to play in a more active and attentive way. It's that type of novelty that might catch many people off guard, but precisely because of that, it ends up being one of the most memorable experiences of the update. What grabbed me most about the Direwasp Disintegrator is how it conveys the feeling of achievement right away. It's not just a strong weapon you unlock at the end of the expedition, it carries the identity of everything you faced. The design with this mechanical insect aesthetic isn't there just for style. It connects directly with the swarm theme and makes the weapon feel like part of this conflict. And the most interesting thing is that it's not a generic multi-tool. Its focus on dealing with hordes changes the way you play quite a bit, especially in more chaotic situations. Instead of playing it safe all the time, you start to advance more, control groups, and position yourself better to take advantage of its power. I also like how unlocking it requires real involvement with the expedition. You need to participate, fulfill objectives, and expose yourself to the event's challenges. This creates a different relationship with the reward because it stops being just an item and becomes a direct consequence of your progress within that scenario. In the end, the Direwasp ends up representing the update's proposal well. It's not just an equipment upgrade, it's practically a summary of the experience. Face the swarm, learn from it, and use it to your advantage. When you equip this weapon, it feels like you took a piece of that story with you. This Direwasp Jetpack, for me, is the type of item that doesn't just change the look, it changes how you feel playing. Because, let's be honest, No Man's Sky has always had many beautiful things, but this one has a very strong identity. It's strange, half organic, half mechanical, and gives a feeling that there is something alive in there. The effect of it buzzing as if there were thousands of mechanical insects is what really sells the idea. It's not just static aesthetics, it's something that moves, that seems unstable, almost uncomfortable. And this matches the update's theme very well, which leans toward this more threatening, more alien side. It even gives that feeling that you are using technology that shouldn't exist. Visually, I think it's one of the most striking cosmetics the game has ever received. It draws attention from afar, has personality, and completely moves away from the cleaner standard that many pieces of equipment had before. It's the type of item you equip not just because it's beautiful, but because it tells a story just by its design. In the end, even being something more aesthetic, it helps a lot with immersion. Because you are not just facing the swarm, you start to look like part of this strange universe as well. And for me, when a cosmetic can do that, integrate you better into the game's theme, it already fulfills much more than just being pretty. This idea of cleaning up ecosystems was one of the things that surprised me most in this update, because it totally changes the mood of the experience. Instead of just facing the swarm all the time, you take on an almost opposite role of rebuilding what was destroyed. It gives a break to the chaos and brings a more contemplative side, but still with purpose. The interesting thing is that it's not just going out and collecting random resources. There is a clear feeling that that planet was affected by something bigger, with toxic waste, corruption, and anomalies scattered throughout the environment. This makes every action feel significant, as if you were actually fixing the damage left by the invasion and not just completing one more mission. I really like how this connects with exploration. You need to scour the planet, find affected areas, and understand what needs to be solved. And in this process, the game ends up telling an environmental story without needing to speak directly, just by the state of the world and the traces the swarm left behind. This mechanic adds a very good balance within the expedition. It doesn't stay just in that constant pressure of combat and competition. There is this moment of reconstruction that gives more weight to everything, because you are not just fighting the problem, you are helping to recover what was lost.